This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 249 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today I've got some stories for you about the dangers of elephants. We've actually I certainly seem to spend a lot of time talking about elephants in the more traditional kind of tourism sense. They're also a really good kind of case study when we talk about wildlife tourism and ethical tourism and stuff. We talk about the situations where you can interact with them and how things have changed over the years. But sometimes my guests tell me completely different stories about animals, and in particular elephants. And I've got a couple of stories from guests who've told me about coming across elephants in the wild in situations that are particularly dangerous. It's just another side of the travel and elephant story that I wanted to share. So I've got these couple of stories that fit together very well, and I hope you find them as fascinating as I did. And it will make you feel, you'll keep on your toes if you're anywhere where elephants are nearby. So my first guest is Catherine Marshall, and she describes an experience that she had many years ago, in fact on her honeymoon in Kruger National Park. It was one of many visits she'd made to the park, but this one stands out particularly in her memory for reasons which will become apparent.
I'm terrified of elephants. I love them, but I'm terrified of them because my now husband and I were in Kruger Park, which we used to go to all the time. And we were on a very remote dirt road, and we were traveling in a combi, an old combi. We were at a certain height, which was just the right height for an elephant's tusks to kind of, come through.
Yeah.
And we saw a nursery herd crossing the road, and we know to be very wary with nursery herds in particular.
Right.
And they usually have a scout that will come around in the bush and try and chase you away. So my husband was driving, and he was taking photographs, and I was looking out for the scout, and the elephants were far from us. And next thing, the scout came out right in front of us and started chasing us. So Terence threw the camera on my lap and put the car into reverse, but it was a very windy, narrow road, and it went down into a riverbed.
Oh, God.
So he reversed, and the elephant, all I remember was these flapping ears and these tusks coming at us.
Oh, how terrifying. God.
And we then had to carry on straight because we were headed for another camp. We had quite a long journey that day, and we couldn't retrace our steps. So it was all a bit terrifying. And I've been chased by elephants again since, even though I'm very careful with them. I've been charged with a guide in Kenya in the Serengeti in Tanzania.
Wow.
And when I see elephants, I just start shaking. Even if they look calm and docile, I start shaking. And I'm always amazed at foreigners who aren't scared of them, because they can kill you, and they can harm you, and they're not to be messed with.
Yeah.
I think you've got to be very respectful of them.
Yes. Well, I mean, they're much, much, much larger than us. They can do whatever they want, can't they? So.
They're very big, very big.
So these kind of scenarios are already scary enough, but wait until you hear from my second guest. My second guest is Henry Gold, and he's run cycling tours across several continents for decades now. And he had a particularly hairy encounter with an elephant in India.
Elephants are dangerous, they're intelligent, and obviously we don't have enough respect for them because there's less of them.
Yeah.
And that's a tragedy of its own. Basically, we had a trip literally 10 years ago that started in Delhi. Further north. Basically Delhi, and then and it was supposed to end, and it did end at the tip of India, Kanyakumari. I said it was supposed to end because I didn't end it, but everybody else did finish it. And it was already towards the end. We were in southern India. We had a wonderful, wonderful trip. A trip, you always enjoy these trips that you worry about things, particularly on a bicycle when you go for the first time to a country you have never been to. And you're very apprehensive, 1.3 billion people, masses of traffic you imagine for what you see, and you're saying, well, how are we going to cycle through this?
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. But, my staff found wonderful country roads, and we were able to go through it. And I enjoy the madness on India. It was chaotic. It was wonderful. It's scenic. It's smelly. It's, everybody knows that. Taste food. I love the food. Anyway, we were already in the south, and we were cycling. We left the city, and I'll forget the name of the city. It will come back to me. We were cycling through a national park, which was great. And we knew there were elephants in the national park, so that was wonderful. We paid very much attention, and we went through it, and there was no problem. And we ended up being in a lovely lodge in a forested area, but no longer a park. But I would say 5-6 kilometers from a kind of what in India they call a village, but I would say it was a little town. 25,000 people or something.
Oh, yeah. It's more than a village to me too. Actually, I think that's a city here, but yeah.
And so we stayed in the lodge, and the style we travel on our cycling tour is that essentially you eat your breakfast, you pack your belongings, you put them on a vehicle, and then you take off. And people take off whenever they're ready to take off. So it's not a group, and they don't get a guide, but they get the instruction how to go. And there's a whole system that we have developed that works very well. We have gone through over 80 countries, and we have never lost anybody.
Actually, that's a very good record. Well done.
So people have left, but there was a young lady from US who actually was with me a few years before that in Africa on a tour that I was leading. And in Africa, we go through an area in Botswana, which we actually call the whole section, we call it Elephant Highway. And we call it Elephant Highway because there's so many elephants that everybody sees an elephant, whether by, when you cycle, they're just inevitable.
Right.
And she didn't. She was the only one on that trip that never saw an elephant. So anyway, on this particular day, I'm always the last person to leave, just because I'm slow and because it's my habit and because I like to be behind just in case there are problems. I can be there and help. So as I came out of the lodge, everybody was gone except this young lady who was struggling with her bicycle. She was having some problems. So I went to her and we fixed the bike and we decided to move on. And again, we went sort of from the lodge back to the main road. When I say main road, it's a very narrow country road, kind of a lane, at most lane and a half in India. Very little traffic. And this is a road that, again, essentially I don't want to call it wilderness, but much more of a nature than you expect in India. We were going through a forested area between two national parks. We were going to head into another national park where, again, there were going to be elephants. So, and we've been told that some of these elephants are not behaving. So when you go through the national park, go as a group. And stay together and so on.
Okay.
So everybody was given the instruction, and as I said, we did it the day before, and there was no problem. We did see elephants. They didn't attack us. They didn't do anything. They didn't pay any attention to us. So anyway, we when we got on that main road from the lodge, we went, a few minutes. I would say another 5 kilometers from the lodge. And we were going a little uphill, when ahead of us, she was actually about 25, 30 yards ahead of me. I was behind her. And then another, maybe 100 yards ahead of her was an elephant with two young ones crossing the road. Sort of a classic, peaceful crossing, no ear flapping, no nothing, nothing that people tell you, watch out when an elephant is. In fact, didn't pay any attention to us. What did happen was at the same time a car came and passed the elephant, and honked at the elephant. And again, the elephant wasn't spooked or anything, just did its own thing and went. So I was actually very pleased because, this young lady, as I said, didn't see the elephant before, and I thought, wow, she came to India, now she sees what a present, now she's on a bicycle. And she kept riding, and I followed her. I didn't think much of it. As I said, there was no reason, and again, because we have this experience in Africa, there was no reason for me to be worried. And then, so we advanced, and I sort of made a point in my mind when I saw the elephants to kind of see where the elephant was crossing the road, whereabouts roughly it is, simply because I wanted to see again if I'm going to catch a glimpse of the elephant, because seeing wildlife is always precious to me.
Of course.
And so I made that point. And slowly moved up that hill. And then when I sort of thought, well, I have now either reached or passed the point where the elephant went into the forest. So I don't see it. And as soon as that thought entered my mind, an elephant came through the trees running full speed. And, when they run full speed, it wasn't like his ear was flapping and was preparing to do anything. It was just charging, full charge. Well, at that point, I think it would have been about 10, 15 yards max from me, max. And because, as I said, it was a forested area, and it was just, the road cut through it, and a little bit of a space between the road and the forest. So at that point, realizing that I'm not a very fast rider, and certainly not uphill, I thought, well, my only chance really here to get away from this elephant was really to turn around. And get some speed, go downhill, so I thought I better make a quick U-turn, and unfortunately the road was very narrow. I was in the middle of it and trying to make a sharp turn so I don't fall off of the shoulder, which was about 6 inches higher. The asphalt was about 6 inches higher than and I knew if I get off the road, I won't make it back on the road.
Yeah.
So I tried to make that sharp turn, and of course I fell. So when I fell off the bicycle, I sort of thought, well, what your mind worked very quickly. What do you want to do now? Well, what's next? And so my instinct simply said, well, you got to get into the forest and zigzag between the trees, and it's your only chance here to get away. And I immediately followed that. And again, the mind calculated that the best chance here is I sort of almost ran towards the elephant, but in a kind of a 45 degrees, so to force him to make a sharp turn, which will slow him down. At least that was my calculation.
Yeah, wow.
And I was, at that point I was a world champion in sprint, and I ran as fast as I could, of course. And then I heard the elephant actually stepping on a bicycle, so I actually congratulated myself. I thought, this is great, it worked. Yeah. His momentum was such that it carried him now, and he stepped on a bike, and now he's got to make another turn. And I figured, okay, now I have to. I was already by then in the forest, and I said, okay, now I have to make another sharp turn, so that he'll have to make another turn. At that point, and as soon as I thought trying to make the turn, I felt something grabbing me by the ankle, and it was the trunk of the elephant grabbing me, and I was in the air. And I was, So at that point, here in Canada, if you like nature and you go out you've been to Western Canada, there are lots of bears.
I was really worried about the bears,
I,
I have to admit, yes.
and, I hiked in Western Canada. I worked a little bit when I was a young man in Western Canada. And of course, they tell you if you get attacked by a bear, go into a fetal position, to give as little space as possible for the attack. So that was my only experience. So my mind again set myself go into fetal position and give him as little space as possible to hurt you. And the next thought that I recall was my helmet cracking. The elephant stepping on my helmet on my head, essentially.
Oh.
My helmet cracking, and my mind, interestingly enough, and God knows why and how, but you hear all these stories that you're seeing your life in front of you, and or you're saying goodbye to your parents or whoever. The thought that I had in my mind was saying, "This is very interesting. What happens next?"
A calm observer. Like watching a film.
As I said, then what happened next, either I lost consciousness or I basically, the mind just erased, the painful stuff because, the next conscious thought I have, I'm now flat on my back, no longer on the side, fetal position, I'm flat on my back, and the elephant is actually running back into the forest, essentially fast, getting away from me as fast as he attacked me. She attacked me. I don't know whether he or she, because again, for a while I thought it was definitely the mother. Then I heard that actually there's always a male who watches from the side to protect the family. But then nowadays I think again it must have been a female because she ran back so quickly that the male I don't think would be worried about the young ones. So anyway,
yes, of course, yeah.
there I was on the ground. Just taking measure, looking up, I realized I wasn't dead. I thought I had a broken back. I knew I was hurt. I just didn't know what. So a few months before that, I literally just took a wilderness rescue course,
right,
where they teach you how to check someone who is hurt badly and, check for the signs and start with, if the person is conscious, ask him to move his feet or his toes and etc. So there I was now practicing rescue on myself. I said, okay, let's see if my foot is working, if my two toes are moving, I can feel it. So I did that on my right foot, and I said, oh, that's work, that's good. So then I said, all right, let's try the left foot, and I moved my left foot, and then said, well, that works, that's great. Then I said, all right, let's see if you can lift the leg a little bit, bend the knee. So I pulled it towards me, while lying the top is completely still. And I managed to move, one knee and then the other knee. So I said, well, this is working. Which is, you're starting encouraging yourself.
This is not as bad as it could be, maybe. Yeah. Oh my gosh!
And then and the key element that they teach you in rescue is you don't want to move the person's head because the person's head move, you're gonna become quadriplegic if he has a broken back or a broken neck, even worse, right?
Yeah.
So I lie there for about 15, 20, 30 seconds, saying, "Well, you shouldn't move your head now. You shouldn't do anything." But then sort of a little panic came in. I said, but nobody will find me here. I'm in a forest. I have no choice. I have to, I convinced myself that I have to lift my head, which was, again, the wrong thing to do. But I convinced myself and I moved it and there was no pain. And I said, well, okay, well, maybe it's not what I think it is, maybe I don't have a broken back. Oh. So then I said, well, let's see if I can get myself to sit up a little bit, to sit on my bum. Pull myself up, which I tried. At that point, I realized that my arm was basically just hanging completely. Oh. It was an open fracture. The bone was sticking out completely.
Oh, wow.
This was not moving at all. The wrist was broken, and so I just kind of grabbed my right hand. I pulled by my shirt. I pulled myself, put it kind of on my tummy. At that point, I also was beginning to lose a bit of my vision because I didn't know that, but the orbital bone was also fractured.
Oh, wow.
My lower back was fractured, but wasn't damaged. At that point, I had ribs that were fractured. So there were a bunch of, but relatively speaking, I was okay.
You were alive.
I was alive. And that's, by the way, exactly the same thing that the surgeon said to me after he checked everything and the x-rays, etc. And he said, considering you're doing very, very well, he said. Anyway, so at that point, I said, okay, well, you're not going to get up now because that would be really stupid. I thought, well, maybe the young lady ahead of me either heard something, maybe she heard the elephant stepping on a bicycle or something. So I yelled her name. She didn't respond. I yelled her name again. She didn't respond. At that point, I come from a screaming family. My father was a horrendous screamer. He had a Shakespearean voice, and we had the big fights. And the only way to fight with him was try to scream louder. So I had that ability to scream as loud as possible. So I said, "All right, give your father's scream now. See if you can." And I did. And then she responded, but she responded actually. She was close by. She was just behind the trees. But her voice broke. Her voice broke. So she came back for some reason, either because she saw something, heard something, or maybe she already heard me screaming and she came back. But her voice broke. So at that point, I said to her, "Stephanie, stay calm, because if you don't stay calm..." No, I said, "Stephanie, stay calm because I need help. But if you're not going to stay calm, you're not going to be any help to me." And at that point, she responded calmly. She said, "I'm fine, Henry." So I said, "Stephanie, I need an ambulance right away. There's a phone on my bicycle in my bag. Please call ambulance right away." And she said, "I have my own phone and I'll call right now." And I said, "Don't even come here. Just call an ambulance." She didn't call the ambulance. She called the actual tour leader, which is the fellow who I actually took the course, the rescue course.
With. Oh, that's
he was
handy.
ahead of me, and he was actually on a bicycle. But when she told him, better come back quickly, Hannah's been hurt, he actually commandeered a car, Indian car. He just said to the driver,
"Help!"
Get back.
Oh, like in a movie.
Oh, the whole thing is, part of it is like a comedy in some way. He came, and then he just took over and started doing the exercises, everything we learned. And I with my own instinct, I kept trying to be funny, trying to tell him, my approach to this was that, that people will panic, and if they panic, I can't help myself, and if they panic, then they can't help me either.
Yeah.
So I was trying to keep everybody around me calm by doing that. But so periodically, I said to him when he came, I said, his name is Shani. It's a male, even though his name is Shani. A lot of people think it's a female. I said, Shani, this is not an exercise anymore. So
This is the real thing.
just in case you didn't realize. So anyway, the ambulance came within, 20 minutes, half an hour. It took me to the little town, and that was where the ambulance was. It wasn't the ambulance that we are used to. It's basically a vehicle with a kind of a place to lie down. They put me there, and then they took me to the clinic in the little town where he wasn't a doctor, he was just a nurse, I suppose. So he patched me up because the real danger would have been, my vein opening up and bleeding to death. Again, the fact that I didn't die from something or other is just, pure
miraculous.
Miracle or luck or fortune, or I don't know. And after he patched me up, they took me back into the ambulance to the big city, which we left the day before, which was called, now I remember it, called Mysore. So there was another 120 kilometers of driving to Mysore. So that took over 2 hours. Now, if you want to hear, I told you there was a bit of a comedy to this. This all been taking time. And as we were sort of about an hour in the ambulance, and I'm cracking all these terrible jokes to keep Shani calm. At some point, Shani says that I seem to be okay. He says to me, "Henry, can I ask you something?" And I said, "Sure." He said, "Can we stop the ambulance because I need to pee badly? I just need to pee badly." And I said, "Sure, no problem. What's the big deal? Just go." So he knocks on the driver's, and the driver has an assistant. So they stopped the ambulance, and the three of them jump out of the vehicle and go pee. And it's all of a sudden when you're by yourself, your mind begins to play all sorts of tricks, and you're thinking, like, that half a minute or whatever, it's just like it's been 5 minutes, and you start thinking, like, what the heck are you doing? What, they abandoned me?
Yes.
How long did it take to pee?
I'm going to die all alone in the back of this ambulance.
Yeah, exactly. And you think you're in a Saturday night skit or something, a bad movie from the 80s,
That's right.
It's just unbelievable. Anyway, they came back and we drove, and no, but the funny part about it was only that they had the siren on while they were peeing,
Oh, no, really? Not necessary.
The vehicle is stopped, and the siren is going on. It's like wow. Anyway, they got me to a hospital. They first took me to a government hospital where again, two young doctors, government doctors, started checking me out, and one of them said, "Listen, right around the corner is a private hospital. You should take him there because they'll take better care of him." And then he said, "But if you're going to do this, you better do it fast." Now, when I heard that, then I said, "Wow, I'm not. Maybe I'm not in such a good shape."
Yeah, exactly. That's scary. Yeah.
But they did. They took me to the hospital there, and there the surgeon was already been waiting because Shani actually called the hotel we were staying the night before. And the hotel owner basically said, go to the private hospital. The person in charge of the emergency and surgery is a friend of ours.
Oh, perfect.
And so he was actually standing at the door when the ambulance arrived.
Wow.
And he was like a godsend. He was one of those things. Again, it's like in a movie. When you see a doctor who speaks. Sort of like a monk, speaks very softly, very quietly, and everybody just like does whatever he says, like a military. But he speaks, you can hardly hear him. It was just just a delight. Anyway, he was the one who did the surgery, and the same evening, he did the surgery, and Shani basically left before the surgery. I told him, go back, you have a job to do. I'm fine. And that was it. That was the incident. I spent 5 days in the hospital or so, and then I was released, and another 2 or 3 days in a hotel, and I flew home.
As Henry said, it's pretty miraculous that he survived that elephant attack. We went on to chat a little further, and he explained that about a year afterwards he did need some more surgery, but he's now more or less fully recovered. It's a decade on, and he's exceedingly grateful for that. Now has a really, really crazy story to tell. So there you go. So watch out for elephants, everyone. Thank you for listening to episode 249 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. And thanks so much to my two guests for their elephant stories. First up, I chatted with Catherine Marshall. The best place to find more of her work is at timetowander.com.au. Lots of fabulous travel stories from Catherine and three of her fellow journos. And to find out more about Henry Gold, he's the founder of TDA Cycling, and you can find more info at tdaglobalcycling.com. Don't forget to come and chat in either our Facebook group or our LinkedIn group. In Facebook, just search for Thoughtful Travellers and you'll find us there. And the easiest way to find the LinkedIn group is just to head to my shortcut for it, notaballerina.com/LinkedIn. All of these links and more will be in the show notes. And for this episode, the show notes are at notaballerina.com/249. As always, thanks so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.